It's alright, I say. I'm sure the others don't mind. Still, it's too bad that the doctor writes you can modify your stat device to also generate a voice alongside your text. Maybe that way it would have been easier for you to join a discussion in a natural way without constantly having to feel like you're interrupting. Yes, exactly, Lila writes, as she suddenly tries as she suddenly turns towards me, actually a little too excited that somebody actually managed to place himself in her shoes to see from her perspective. That's exactly why I feel whenever I try to join the conversation. It's like I'm always interrupting. Well, it's not a surprise that you feel that way, I say. Even if your device is designed to translate your thoughts into words, I imagine that there is still a sizable delay between the moment when you are having your thoughts and the moment when the device actually displays the text. Also, from what I've seen, you have control over the position of your text and its size too, so for the times you're done setting up all those variables, the brief point in time where you could insert yourself in that conversation without making things awkward is probably long gone. Lena writes while looking at the wall in front of her as she slowly extends her leg. If I somehow manage to get the timing right, if I don't place the text in a spot that is visible for everyone, they might notice it too late. Then I'd still be interrupting. Having a voice would make things so much easier. Well, I say, I'm not sure how much this helps, but at the very least, now you can be rest assured that there is one person in the world who can imagine you with a voice. What do you mean? Oh right, we did hear her. Layla is confused. The voice from the ethereal plane, remember? I tell Layla, the one that was translating your thoughts to me while we were both being sent around the room, flying by the Magium. Ever since that moment, I've been subconsciously reading all of your text with the voice in my head, even if I know that it isn't your real voice. Hey, is something wrong? Your face is all red. I almost forgotten that you had to hear. I almost forgotten that you got to hear the voice from my head while we were in there. Taylor writes as her text is getting blurry and shaky, likely due to being embarrassed. The voice from your head? I say, hold on a minute. Do you actually mean to say that the voice I heard was actually the voice you're using in your head to think? Oh, that is interesting, because like I could use the voice in my head. I could make that voice speak in any way, shape, or form I want to. Like, and the voice can speak in a growly, really fucking Henry Cavill ass fucking looking. He could speak in the most feminine voice or something. You could speak as Dylan Mulvaney, whatever, just whatever voice you can think of. I can make my head voice speak that way. But for her, most people, however, use the voice in their head with the same voice that they have. I do too, for the most part. So that's why the voice in your head is usually the same voice for most situations as the voice you have. But since she doesn't have a voice, she can just use any voice she wants. So this is the voice she settled on, apparently. Hold on a minute. You mean to say that the voice I heard was actually the voice you're using in your head while you were thinking? Layla does not write anything, but she nods weakly. Well, her face is still red as a tomato. But how, I say? You have never had the chance to hear your real voice before, have you? It's not my real voice, and I don't think I actually have one, Layla writes as she is slowly calming down. Her face is becoming less red. But ever since I was little, I always wished to have a voice like all the other kids, so I kind of made one for myself in my own head. I kept changing it every few years or so to make it sound more grown up. I think the voice you heard was the latest version of it, which is the one I'm using to think right now, because I could hear my thoughts echoing around me in the ethereal plane, and they sounded just like it. To be honest, when I made this voice, I didn't really expect anyone other than me to ever hear it, so talking about it is a little embarrassing. Well, I think your voice sounds wonderful. So that's the reason why your voice sounded so artificial and unnatural. That is hilarious. I think your voice sounds wonderful. Thank you, Layla writes in an uncharacteristically shy look in her face. So, would it be alright if I asked you how you come up with your voice, I say, or is it something too personal? It's fine, Layla writes. There wasn't any special meaning behind my voice or anything. I just used the voices of the other girls around me as a reference point. I played around with different tonalities in my head until I found one that I liked. What about you? Your thinking voice was the same as the one you used to talk, right? Was it something that you chose consciously, or it just happened? Something that happened without you giving it much thought? This is interesting, because from her perspective, she's like, okay, I made up the voice in my head, So does the person in front of me also made up the voice in their head? But in her case, it's not exactly correct, because like a person who can speak, their head voice would more, for the most situation other than they're imagining something specific, would be the exact fucking same as their real voice, because that's the one they're most used to, which is very interesting that she would ask this question. They did a very good job. I love the I'm not, as I said, I'm really trying to avoid romance in this playthrough, because there are multiple choices and it's just like, oh, which one should we pick? I probably will at some point. It's probably going to take a long time because I believe book 4 is not out yet. So once I'm finished with book 3, I'm probably going to just go back and just gonna try and get every, like, I'm not gonna do every achievement because I will go insane if I try to do that. It's really fucking convoluted. Hopefully when they bring out book 4, they make an update where it's like easier to go back and forth. So maybe I'll wait for book 4. Once this like Magium is entirely done, hopefully they have updated this like software to allow me to go back to certain points to make different choices and like create a different timeline, like a plus button, like click the plus button and pick your choices from this point, and then the choices in front of it gets changed accordingly and shit like that. I would love for that to happen, because that would be awesome. It would just save me so much. I would really want to show you guys all the achievements this game has, because the achievements are like really fucking cool, but it's just like impossibly difficult for me to do so. It would take like 2 or 3 days of me just like bashing my head against a fucking fucking wall to get that shit done, and I'm not doing that. I say as I begin to slowly stroke my chin with my right hand without realizing. Now that you mention it, how did I get this voice in my head? I remember that when I was a kid, I used to speak with my child voice, but then when my speaking voice changed gradually over time as I grew up, so did the voice in my head change at the same, so did the voice in my head change at the same time, or did it lag behind? Did I ever make a conscious effort to update my thinking voice, or did it happen naturally? It happened naturally. And why did I never think about this until now? While I was still busy trying to solve this most intriguing conundrum, Layla suddenly begins to giggle uncomfortably in her usual silent fashion. Does she make sound when she giggles? I believe I've asked this question before. I don't remember if I ever got the answer. Did I say something wrong? I ask her confused. No, I'm sorry, Lil writes as she's trying to stop herself from her silent laugh. It's just that it just seeing you thinking out loud like this remind me of how your thoughts sounded when we were being sent back and forth throughout all of the planes of existence. You were overthinking things in the same way back then too. Well, in my defense, I say I'm practically been doing magic research for more than half of my life. So overthinking things is pretty much second nature to me by now. I suppose you're right, Layla writes with a smile, as she now seems to have finally managed to contain her laughter from before. After a few seconds of silence, I mean, they do call it a silent giggle, so I suppose, but like I could also silently giggle without making a sound, but I don't know. After a few seconds of silence, Layla writes again while she is looking pensively towards the wall in front of her. We've really been through a lot together, huh? Yeah, this is probably the romance bit. I don't know why should I avoid this? Haven't we? The writing says, we've fought each side by side in an arena. We've heard each other's thoughts. We've held onto each other for dear life so that we wouldn't get erased from existence. After writing disappears, there is a brief pause during which it feels like we are both revisiting the events from the tower in our head without so much as a word from either of us. We've been completely avoiding the subject all night. Now that I see how reluctant we are to discuss it even after it's been brought up, I think I'm beginning to understand why. I was actually scared, when it all happened, Layla writes, deciding to be the first one to break the ice after a long silent pause. I might not have let it show on my face, but I clearly remember that at the time I was overcome with fear of the likes that I've never experienced before in my life. Yeah, I say, I was scared too. Even with my defective survival instinct, the fear of getting trapped in the endless void again, forever, managed to get the better of me. I don't think it was the idea of no longer existing that scared me the most at the time, Layla writes. It's rather, do you remember the conversation we had in the tunnel about what would happen if you had actually been erased by the Magium during the God of Time trials? But how in a world like that, I would have to live it my life trying to convince others and myself, even myself, that you really existed and weren't just a fragment of my imagination. I think